The first major production I ever designed sound for, Three Penny Opera at Studio 54, and it starred Cyndi Lauper, Nellie, McKay, and Alan Cumming. I had followed in, they're more of a classical theater kind of place, so they were doing South Pacific, you know, whatever, Pacific Overtures, things that were quiet in that. And they wanted it to rock, and it's an acoustic show. I mean, it's an all acoustic instrumentation. It was Kurt Weill's work. And it was very difficult because the orchestra was split, and I had to make it sound like, you know, what the director wanted was a rock concert. And normally when you went to see a show there, people were like, oh, there's the drum. I hear the drum coming from there, and there's this and that. You know, it was very intimate and quiet. And he was like, the guy's going to come in and rescue her in assless chaps on a horse that's going to fly in a la, you know, Studio 54, throwing glitter over the audience. It doesn't want to be quiet. But nobody had told Studio 54 we were doing this. And I still have the hate letters to this day because they're so good. I mean, people really hated me. But it was a lot of fun. The mixes for In Transit were all based on what each performer decided they needed. Now, being somebody who's musical and done monitors, I know that a lot of times people ask for what they don't need. Teaching them what they needed to listen to often meant giving them what they asked for and letting it fail. And just, you know, as long as everyone had the patience for that. The tonic's always in the bass, and the bass gets tired. They start to sing sharp, and then the entire show gets sharp. So like we would always constantly, like, here's your root, and sometimes, you know, here's 1, 5, blah, blah, blah. We would give them clicks, and there was a beatboxer, and the beatboxer pretty much was just Click City. That's like when I listened to his mix, I'd be like, okay, you have a little bit of everybody, but mostly this is about the click. You know, the chorus pretty much learned that they wanted an even mix whenever they were singing backup singing, but certain songs, everybody was featured. So that would be cue to re-rack so that the soloist was heard by everybody, and you would dump into a choral group. And yeah, my engineers were very, very busy. The path for sound designers, there's a couple paths to becoming a Broadway sound designer. Most start as engineers and become assistants and associates. My path was a little weird because I didn't follow that. I came from doing all the clubs and mixing and rock and roll and kind of being pulled in by directors who would come see these shows and be like, who's that guy? Because I have a little bit of theatrical flair to my mixes. I tried to stay out of the way, but there was little embellishments that people started to notice. I kind of jumped the assisting part, and which is why my career kind of went up and down, because once I made it to Broadway, I realized everything I didn't know. And I decided the best course for me was to head to the West Coast, where where I could kind of learn the language, learn a little more respect for the material. Like, it's not, the rock and roll aesthetic isn't always correct. And I figured I could fail out there and not have as much on my face, because it's a very, very insular community. So once you're on Broadway, I mean, I can tell you everybody who's designing this year on Broadway, and we call each other all the time, like, hey, this is failing. Like, have you ever used this console? Does this work? I mean, we're always fighting each other for the work, but we generally look out for each other too. I do these college tours, and I always tell kids in the college tours, if they want to be a sound designer, learn to listen. I mean, it sounds so silly, it sounds so base, but listening to every kind of music, because knowing how the material should sound and is really important. And in listening to it before I screw it up, like, I always step in and take a listen to the orchestra unmiked. Just listening, and it's so, I think people stop doing it. Like, they just have an idea, like, this is what it's going to sound like. And I'm like, you know, if you tune that snare up a little bit, it's going to be, because acoustically it's not correct. Like, I can't correct that. And when I have my assistants, I make them do that with me. I'm like, take a listen to that guitar, what do you think? And they're like, oh, it's great. And I'm like, listen to that guitar, what do you think? Oh, something's buzzing in there. Right. Do you think it's the bridge? And you're like, we'll solve that with the instrument versus me trying to solve it with, like, I'm going to gate here, I'm going to do that. Like, I really want everyone to listen and listen to all the music, and, you know, listen to the way that subway sounds. That's key to it.